listening to Late Night Radio on the SHR Media Network. Caution, there will be mature themes explored and potentially adult language used. If conservatarian words, phrases, certain concepts, or rhetoric offends you, tune out now.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike?
You magnificent bastard, I read your book.
I drink your milkshake.
How dare you?
I call that bold talk for a one-eyed fat man.
Fill your hand, you son of a bitch!
Of course you realize this means war.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, that was, I don't know, say 10 minutes of inside radio, courtesy of Sean Lewis, Tech God #1, having fixed everything. And so the funny thing is, last Tuesday night, there was an update for our streaming service. And because you know that I am the techno-Luddite, I hit the update. And then Sean, luckily who is here, came in to fix the update. Now, just before the show, Microsoft decided that it wanted to do an update. So, unbeknownst to us, when we started the show, that's where all the echoes came from. And what the Microsoft update did was turn every camera speaker on, which gave us all the echoes. So much for my intro. I will say this. I am BZ. I am the Bloviating Zeppelin. You're in the Saloon. BZ's Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show. It is... And I didn't even update this yet. Okay, it is October. As I do this live... It's October the 8th, the year of our Lord, 2020. Poor Shannon Wright has been on the phone waiting for me, probably listening on the other end of the phone, because she's going to talk in the first hour, and she's probably thinking to herself, what have I just been hearing? And so I apologize. I apologize to Shannon because she's so... Okay, all right, I hear her snickering in the background. Because, Shannon, you guys have never had any technical issues on your show with your husband Mike, have you?
Oh, sure. No, never.
No, because everything's always been perfect, technologically perfect on your show.
Absolutely. Well, see, that's because my husband is a tech genius. compared to me especially. So whatever, it's the way it's supposed to be.
Oh, Shannon Wright, thank you ever so kindly for being so patient. Folks, a glimpse into what's going to happen tonight. For the first hour of the show, I've got Shannon Wright. Now, she is running for mayor of Baltimore. So, obviously, we've started the show. So, Shannon Wright, good evening. And thank you so kindly for taking time out of your busy schedule, because you really are really, really busy these days.
Oh,
and for also, I must also appreciate the sacrifice of appearing so late at night, because here on the left coast, it's only, it's like 8:13, which means it's 11:13 where you are on the East Coast. So thank you, number one. I had you and your husband, Mike Wright, and they are from right here, from SHR Media. They've got The Right Way with Shannon and Mike. It's a morning show that they have been doing here. And then Shannon decided that she was going to run for Republican mayor of Baltimore. And that was something very, very important. So they haven't had the ability to do the shows with regularity. Now, I spoke to her May of last year. Shannon, that's how long it's been. May of last year since you've been here. And that's when you began your candidacy for Republican, which blows people away, I bet, Republican mayor of Baltimore. Now, folks, there are only 26 days left now before the election, because the presidential election is also the election for mayor of Baltimore. So before we even get going, can you tell folks what your website is and where it can be found, Shannon Wright?
Yes, it is wrightforbaltimore.com, and that's WRIGHTFOR, Baltimore, BALTIMORE.com.
Okay.
And I got to start by saying thank you to you for your very generous support of my campaign.
Okay, I wasn't going to bring it up, but you did. I donated $100 either earlier this year or late last year, one of the two, and then today I threw another $100 in because I should. And
yes,
if we can't,
I appreciate it.
You are very welcome, because if we at SHR can't support each other, then who the heck can we support? Well. So, what's your priority, Shannon Wright? What's your priority right now in the Republican candidacy for mayor of Baltimore? Is it volunteers? Is it donations? Where could you most use the work right now?
Both. Honestly, both. Baltimore City is 10-to-1 Democrat to Republican ratio.
Holy.
Yeah, it's a heavy lift. The last Republican mayor left office in 1967. So we've got I hear you snickering now. We've had our work cut out for us this year. Republicans in the city are constantly and consistently ignored and overlooked. Because of that, we get a lot of folks that put their name on the ballot, so there's a name there, and don't really run the race. And that's not me. So we have been running this race for over a year. We have done incredibly well this election cycle with earned media. Most of the networks are actually covering us. One particular network actually finds some value, I'm not sure why, in what I say and what we're working on. So they have me on regularly, and I mean weekly, and whenever there's a breaking story, there's press conferences and statements and media hits and all of that sort of thing. So that's kind of really good to see, because like I said, Republicans are usually ignored. We had our state party did some polling data to say that right now I'm polling at 67% name recognition and ID,
okay,
which for a Republican is unheard of.
Yeah, you've got some making up to do for 1967 on.
You could say that. It's a lot of work. interestingly enough, for a mayoral campaign in a city the size of Baltimore to run successfully, you're looking at $1 million.
Holy moly!
Yeah. Now, to run unsuccessfully, you could put in $1, and you'd still be on the ballot. Now, my goal personally was to try and raise $100,000 for my own network and some of the things we've been able to do, and then really try and get folks to say, okay, we're serious, we're not going anywhere. Now I need y'all to match me so we can at least get to $500,000. Because my thought was, with $500,000 as a Republican in Baltimore, it would make so much of a statement in the stink, and people would realize we were serious, that we would really be able to get that snowball rolling down the hill and growing, and be able to get to closer, at least, to that $1 million. And then COVID happened, so that really, really threw things for a loop. But I'm happy to say we're about at the $70,000 mark. I have a goal of $100,000 in the next 10 days. Now, I know that sounds like a heavy lift, and people are probably going, how are you going to do that? So, honestly, if we get 1,000 people to put in $10, that would be what? How much?
Yeah, there you go.
Now, if we double that and then double it again, we can do this. There are a whole bunch of conservatives around this country. And see, I'm running to be able to make a difference in Baltimore. But more importantly, or just as important as that, if I can win in Baltimore, I am, as sure as I'm sitting here talking to you, I am positive that it will encourage other folks to run in their cities, in LA and in Chicago and in Atlanta and in New York. And that's the kind of spark and momentum we're looking to create. So it's not just about Baltimore.
No, you're right. And I have an analogy to make. There's a guy here in California that I've had on the show 4 times now. And the gentleman's name is Eric Regard. He's running for the 9th District Assembly in California. And literally, I have had him in the studio because 9th District is right around here. South Sacramento and all that stuff. You know, as you know, I don't care about paint jobs, but he happens to be a black guy. Mm-hmm. You're a black woman. Mm-hmm. There's paint jobs don't matter. What matters is political thought. But the important aspect of all of this is you and people like you who are unique to the political planes are making inroads at a time when what I call the Democrats are most fearful, and they can see that the structure, the foundation is beginning to crack. So you are indicative, Shannon Wright, on the East Coast of what's occurring out here on the West Coast with Eric Regard. He's actually started rolling, and there's a chance he may win. Now, if he and you and Republicans like you who are starting to emerge from the rubble after November 3rd, the Democrats could be in serious trouble. So he's had kind of a difficult time getting the Republican Party to rally around him. However, what he's discovered is that because he's made numerous appearances, he's starting, it's not Sisyphus trying to push the boulder up the hill anymore. He's starting to get some momentum. And this is what people fear, is his momentum, your momentum. And I can't help but believe that you're getting momentum, probably the first momentum for a Republican since 1967, however many years that is, because I'm terrible at math.
It's 53. That's the year I was born.
So yours is a clarion call in Baltimore, just as his is in the state of California. So what I'd like to do right now is play your campaign video, and that's the reason that I called earlier, is to make sure that you can hear it, because this does a really nice job of summarizing things. And then I want to come back, Shannon Wright, who is the Republican candidate for mayor of Baltimore, and then see if we can flesh out a lot of this stuff and add some meat to the bones of this in terms of platform, philosophy, that kind of thing.
My name is Shannon Wright, and I'm running for mayor of Baltimore City. COVID has presented many challenges for me to meet with you in your living room, at your kitchen table, or any place else. During the campaign season, you will hear many sound bites from Bob and Brandon. But as your next mayor, I don't do sound bites, I take action. So here is how I will build an inclusive Baltimore for everyone. Baltimore could be that shining city on a hill if we just had the right priorities. Neither Brandon Scott nor Bob Wallace have that. Their claim? We were born here, and so it's our city. And what does the city gain from them being born here? Crime, corruption, failing schools, and trash, hopelessness and despair. This is not about party. It's about all of Baltimore. As your mayor, I will implement an immediate audit of city finances with a firm that has no ties to the city. And then we're going to do a few more things. We're going to put a freeze on non-essential spending. We're going to have a 20% pay cut on city council members and the highest paid city employees, with those savings going to DPW to get the trash picked up. We're going to do an audit of the school budget to find out where that money went. We're going to hold the superintendent accountable for creating a measurable and achievable plan to get our schools back open and on track in a timely manner. We're going to do a salary review. We're going to increase the salaries of the lowest paid city employees. And last, but certainly not least, we are going to have a meeting with the Commissioner of Police, and we are going to direct him to implement a 30-day decisive plan to turn around crime in the city of Baltimore without excuses. Baltimore City cannot survive or thrive without bold and decisive leadership. My name is Pastor Shannon Wright. With your support and your vote, the next mayor of Baltimore City.
Shannon, I got to tell you, that is a kick-ass ad. But let's start to flesh that out now a little bit, because we've got 35 minutes to do this. There's still a lot of time to be able to really expand on what you try to do in what you're going to try to do in Baltimore. There's a little over 619,000 people in Baltimore. That's kind of daunting. And so let's just start at some of the issues. Even before putting your hat in the ring for mayor of Baltimore, Shannon Wright, you were already involved in Baltimore politics, weren't you?
Yes, I was, and I still am, very much so.
And so what kinds of things were you involved before you threw your hat in the ring for mayor?
So I'm a former third vice chair of the state party, former chair of the Maryland Black Republican Council, and current chair of the Baltimore City Republican Central Committee. Okay,
and about how long has that been going on? How long have you been involved in those sorts of things?
Oh, wow. Well, I've been on the Central Committee for quite some time. 2016 was when I served as third vice chair of the state party and chairwoman of the Maryland Black Republican Council.
So you've already been actively involved in issues around Baltimore, and you know what's going on. You know the issues. You know the problems. Now, your two opponents, whose names I cannot remember right now, but in the video you were saying that their claim to fame apparently is, we were born here.
Yes.
So they're trying to play off the local aspect. Let's start off at the beginning. The next obvious question is going to be, why do you think that you can do something as mayor of Baltimore? We heard a few of the things that you want to do, but what motivated you to run for mayor of Baltimore?
If you're not a part of the solution, you're a part of the problem. So my children are grown. I've done most of the things that I wanted to do. So I kind of felt like it was an opportune time for me to give back. Mike and I lived in New Jersey at one point, and we lost our house there after Hurricane Sandy.
Holy
and
moly.
we moved to Baltimore. And we started investing in the city and the community and neighborhood and all of that, started a new business. And then Freddie Gray happened. And our business was a baking business. And we were the first minority gourmet vendor to be distributed in the Mid-Atlantic region for 7-Eleven stores. And we had just signed the contract expanding from Baltimore City and throughout Maryland and a little bit beyond that the week before the riots happened in Baltimore. For us, being a gourmet baker, we don't use preservatives. Everything is natural. So it was the first time that 7-Elevens had closed, and we lost our entire inventory.
Oh, my God.
So I said, okay, guys, you want me here, but obviously not to do this right now. So what do you want? We watched the chaos in our city. We watched the National Guard and different branches of parts of military I didn't even know existed rolling through the city. It was the first time since I was a teenager I actually was living in a place where I had a curfew. It was really bad. And that kind of motivated me. And a friend of mine asked me if I would consider running for office and if I would get involved. And I took a harder look at it, and I prayed on it. And this is where I am. You know, in life, everybody has gifts and talents. And, you know, when you find them, you kind of got to use them. And one of my gifts or talents, I will say, is being able to understand the word discernment and be able to tell live from Memorex, if you will.
Okay.
And that is a useful skill set in politics, because a lot of folks you get a lot of sound bites and really great snippets, but there's no substance in there. And that's the type of leadership and legislative policies and practice that has taken Baltimore down the rabbit hole for quite some time now. So to be a part of that positive change for the city meant getting off the sidelines. So we did.
Folks, we're talking to Shannon Wright, who is the Republican candidate for mayor of Baltimore. Just like we're going to be electing a lot of people on November 3rd, it isn't just the presidential election. There are many, many local elections all across the fruited plain. I'm not going to do the standard promos right now because it's too important. I just want to remind everybody that you're listening to
Conservative Media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And so I found your opponents. You have you're running against a Democrat called Brandon Scott, and that's my saying that, not you. Mm-hmm. And you're also running against a second Democrat by the name of Bob Wallace. Once I heard your video, I knew, obviously, because of the time involved, I knew, Shannon Wright, that you were a very, very serious person about Mayor of Baltimore. But when you reveal that part of your platform is to pull back the cover and reveal the pit of vipers within by doing audits, etc., my guess would be you have lit a number of tails on fire and stirred the upset beast, or have you?
Well, you could say that. We've had it's been an interesting election cycle. I don't know if I really went into great detail the last time I was on your show. But during the primary, I had an opponent that pretty much lost his mind and decided I was his target. And let's just say last summer, he was convicted of 2 charges of second-degree assault against me. That was in the primary.
Holy crap!
I guess I hadn't shared that with you.
No, I had no idea. None. Now,
Yes,
to say that this person was convicted, that means that there had to be an investigation, an arrest, in jail, bail made, court dates set, a trial, and all that is already over with a conviction.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's a huge amount of time and a huge amount of involvement.
Yes, it really was.
And I know that had to be absolutely incredibly trying just in and of itself, much less the aspect of continuing your race for mayor of Baltimore.
Yes.
I had no idea. I'm so sorry, Shannon. I had no idea. I honestly did not.
Well, it's definitely been an interesting year. One of my opponents in the primary threatened me to drop out of the race. And then, bless her soul, called me to apologize for her behavior, saying that she, might have been indulging a bit much that night because she was celebrating having a going-away party for her boyfriend, who was the former police commissioner in Baltimore who was going away to serve his prison sentence for tax evasion. That was another one of my opponents.
Well, and we also, has not the city of Baltimore had essentially scandal after scandal involving mayors and other persons in elected and appointed positions around the administration of the city of Baltimore? So I was attempting to make a point, but really there is a pit of vipers in Baltimore.
Yes, there is.
and didn't just recently Baltimore lose Mayor Pugh under a bit of fiscal corruption and scandal?
Yes, she is relaxing as a guest of the federal government in Alabama for the next few years, starting her retirement a little bit early, along with her apparently joining her as one of her staffers and key aides, and a state delegate of ours, Cheryl Glenn. Let's see, who else? Our current comptroller will no longer be our comptroller. She's under investigation at the moment. The Board of Ethics was just taken over by the Inspector General's office, and she's investigating a whole bunch of people, mismanagement and let's just call it accidental misplacement of things until we can prove it. Yes, it's been pretty busy here. Mm-hmm.
There are places in Baltimore, Shannon Wright, who is the Republican candidate for mayor of Baltimore. There are places still in Baltimore, correct me if I am wrong, please, that have not been rebuilt or touched since 1968 riots. Is that correct?
You are absolutely correct.
And is that not an amazing statement to make about the city of Baltimore?
It's interesting. You can drive through parts of the city and say, okay, this block was burned down in the riots in the 60s. This block was burned out in, the riots in 2015. And this one was, and you can just go right on through the city. We have over 17,000 abandoned and empty, vacant properties in the city right now. Our population drop has gone to the lowest it's ever been. We are heading for the 6th straight year of 300 plus homicides. It's time for new leadership and new direction. And, it's funny, my opponent's failed leadership has really done a lot of work for me. Because, I can tell people, you don't have to look at parties, but the city's going in the wrong direction. Just period. The city's going in the wrong direction. There are 24 failing schools in the state of Maryland. 12 of them are in Baltimore City.
That's just incredible.
Yep.
That's just incredible. Let me ask you this. You mentioned Freddie Gray, and then, of course, there was George Floyd recently. Mm-hmm. Have you had to recraft your platform, or is it pretty much immaterial in terms of now those things have changed? Did it become easier or more difficult? And or did you change your message at all? Or is it, look, this has pretty much been a stellar, abject failure, and I want to help?
So, interestingly enough, our city was one of those cities that had a lot of, they tried to call them protests after this most recent incident that was, all over the news.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of looting. There was a lot of vandalism. There were fires set, all sorts of things. And my message to folks was an honest one, which was, this is yet another example of how the leadership here in Baltimore has failed the citizens of Baltimore. Had the issues that led up to Freddie Gray and the emotion behind Freddie Gray and the neglected decades and abuse by leadership that was brought to a spotlight in the head by Freddie Gray, had it actually been properly addressed in 2015, our city would not have almost imploded again this year in 2020.
Shannon Wright, I know that for a fact you are a person of faith. In 2020, can someone who believes in faith and family have a seat at the table in Baltimore?
It's funny that you asked that question. I was on a Zoom meeting because, everything is done by that these days.
Right.
With the Chamber of Commerce here in the city. And a gentleman said to me, he said, well, don't you think that your faith is going to be a hindrance and a roadblock for you to be able to do what it takes to get deals done in the city? And I said, if my faith, meaning that I'm going to do the right thing for the right reason, is a problem, it's really quite clear that you are a part of the problem and why this city is going down the rabbit hole it's going down.
Yeah, then you've got much bigger issues than just me, sir.
Yep, absolutely. And we have that conversation live in front of everybody.
These things, Shannon Wright, these things need to come out.
They do?
What? I hate to introduce race, but because of identity politics, I'm left with no choice. What is it about people that and whites that think that blacks don't want or deserve, for example, security from their police, clean water, good homes, good schools? What makes anybody think that those aren't things that everybody wants and needs and demands? I've never gotten that aspect of it.
See, so that's actually an interesting point. And that's one of the ways that I've been reaching the voters here in the city. I mean, it's the same at the end of the day. We kind of want the same thing.
Exactly.
I want to know that my children are being properly educated. I want to know that the streets are safe so that when they leave out in the morning, I can rest assured that they will come back home with all the parts and pieces they left with. There are some basic things we all want. Now, the roadmap we choose to get there may be very different in some cases, but the end results that we're looking for are the same. And there is so much more that unites us than the little bit that divides us. It would seem that, things like civility and decency, those sorts of cliche, old school kind of philosophies would kind of make their way to the forefront at a time like this. And what disappoints me is with COVID, you would think this would be a time for people to say, okay, life is too short. It's time to cut out some of the bull and actually, work together to get some things done. But that's not what I'm seeing.
It would be, you would think, and I think this is, again, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misstating what you just said. At this point in our history, it should be a time of introspection and self-examination, but it appears to be everything but that.
Yes, exactly.
Sergeant Booker in chat said, people of faith is exactly what we need. Simone in chat said, we need God in our country. Politicians that do not believe or support God or hold God. We need good God-fearing politicians. That's exactly what we need right now. Let me throw this out there. It's a little late, and I should have made it at the very beginning, but I had some technical issues. If you want to call and speak to Shannon Wright, 575-208-4481, 575-208-4481. But in the meantime, let me continue. Shannon Wright, Republican candidate for mayor of Baltimore. What do you think that your biggest challenge is going to be in your first month as mayor of Baltimore?
Oh, well, let's see. Well, my first goal, I'll start with that, is day one to fire everybody in City Hall. Invite them all to resign.
That deserves that. Holy moly, yes.
So, again, our goal is to, and forgive me, I'm starting to lose my voice. My goal is to ask everyone in City Hall for their resignation, those that we're not contractually bound to keep, and then give them an opportunity to plead their case for why they should continue to be the recipient of everyone that lives in this city and pays taxes, hard-earned dollars. And if you can do that, show me that you've been doing your job, then you will get to continue to do your job under the clauses of a fresh start with that employment. So that means the things that you did that were incorrect, that you knew were corners and shortcuts and all of that, will not be grandfathered in policies. You will have the opportunity to make your case for your job, but your job description and the expectations will be different. The garbage that exists now will not be grandfathered in my administration.
People look at jobs these days in government as entitlements. They are absolutely not. When you started talking the A word, by the way, when you started talking audit, my guess was that there were explosions that if you were at 1,000 feet in a plane hovering over Baltimore, there were probably explosions all over that city when you mentioned the audit word.
Yes.
Which is exactly what people don't want. The Pit of Vipers want it nice and dark.
Yes.
Want it all covered up. They, as was said in Blazing Saddles, we got to keep our phony baloney jobs. And
absolutely.
And it's not an entitlement. One thing in the process of doing show prep for this show tonight, I discovered that Baltimore has a jewel in it. And I don't know whether that jewel is being taken advantage of, but I started doing some investigation into that jewel. Baltimore has a huge port infrastructure. Now, it's owned by the Maryland Port Administration, and I discovered that it's the nation's largest port facilities for specialized cargo.
Yes.
And those are called ro-ro ships, roll on, roll off. And what that means is that Baltimore is like the major port for bringing vehicles, anything with wheels, into the United States.
Yes.
That is huge. That is a massive piece of incredible infrastructure right under Baltimore's nose. So this very huge, critical, important infrastructure, obviously the port has been affected like everything else by COVID-19.
Right.
But is there something that perhaps historically has not been done, or maybe you could do to include or to improve the Port of Baltimore? Because if there's one thing this city could take advantage of, is that massive port that is a center of infrastructure. It's already there. It's only, I discovered also, the Port of Baltimore is one of just two, deepwater harbors on the entire East Coast that can handle these ships.
Yeah.
That's a massive feather in the in the city, in the cap of the city of Baltimore. So is there something that perhaps can be done to take advantage of what is already there in terms of that infrastructure? Yeah, maybe what I'm trying to say is, has it historically been ignored, and perhaps can you take more advantage of that in a Shannon Wright mayorship?
Well, it has definitely been underutilized, that's for sure. And there are some things that we can absolutely do to be able to turn some of that around. I don't know, are you able to see your messenger messages while you're doing your show?
Well, let me go over here and go over here. So, yes, I can.
Okay. I just sent you two things that even if you just look at the title of the last thing, that would be something I'd like to talk about for a minute.
Hit it.
So, can you see what it says?
No, I'm looking, but that doesn't stop the argument. Make your argument. Please say it.
Okay. So, this is an article from Fox Baltimore, Fox 45 in Baltimore. Republican mayoral candidate Shannon Wright leads prayer vigil for the president at Walter Reed. So I had an interesting opportunity this past Sunday. The president's reelection team and the White House called our state party and asked if we in Maryland could put together a prayer service for the president at Walter Reed, being that he was not going to be able to go to a church service or anything like that. So our state party executive director called me and she said, I know it's last minute notice, it's Saturday evening, but can you put together a prayer service for the president for tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock at Walter Reed? I said, sure. And we did it. And it was picked up by a lot of networks. And the reason we did it is because prayer is a powerful weapon.
Yes.
So when people look at me and they say, well, your faith is going to be or can be a deterrent, I let them know it is not only not a deterrent, it is the greatest weapon. So I tend to believe that a lot of things can be done and changed by faith, and then that faith combined with putting in the work. That's the most powerful thing we've got.
I would send, and yes, I found it over here. So thanks for sending that to me. Because once we get through with the show, I'll push that out into social media. Folks, I'm speaking to Shannon Wright, who is the Republican candidate for mayor of Baltimore, running against two other individuals, both Democrats who believe that they're essentially entitled individuals because they live in the city of Baltimore and have historically done so. But I don't see that they have the philosophy or the platform to really get in and dig deep, do audits, hold people accountable and responsible. That seems to me, Shannon Wright, to be the foundation of your candidacy. Expect responsibility. Expect people to be responsible for what they do. In the Shannon Wright, in the process of doing this, again, show prep, I discovered that Baltimore has what's called the strong mayor system. What that means is that the mayor mostly calls the shots instead of, say, I don't know, a city manager or a city council. So knowing that traditionally has been how Baltimore has been featured, is that a feature or is that a glitch, Shannon Wright?
Well, if you elect the right people, it's a feature.
Okay, is it something that you think should be changed, or should it be left alone?
I think, honestly, it should be left alone. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
You can change whatever you want to change till you're blue in the face. But until you start electing folks that actually have ethics and moral and moral compass even, you can change whatever you want. It's not going to change the outcome. So we have to really wake up and look at who and what we're voting for and supporting. And until we do that, nothing else much matters.
So, Shannon Wright, you have indicated that you plan to hold the people that are already in various positions all through Baltimore government. You plan to hold their feet to the fire so that they are responsible and answerable to what it is that they have done in the past, what they are doing now, and what they plan to do in the future. That's heinous to people in government. Like I said, the A word, the audit word, it's like people, they may blow up in fire just when you mentioned the audit word. Well, there are a bunch of issues involved, again, doing show prep for this tonight. Infrastructure is a huge issue because it would appear that much of Baltimore is crumbling. Do you have any thoughts about the area of infrastructure in the city of Baltimore?
Well, we do have an aging and crumbling infrastructure that we need to deal with. It affects water, it affects roads, it affects it affects a very significant amount of the daily life issues in the city. And again, it's something that needs to be addressed. Now, interestingly enough, Baltimore right now is dealing with I believe we're at the fourth highest levels of COVID in our state. Yet we are the only municipality and jurisdiction in our state that is so poorly managed that our Department of Public Works has had to suspend recycling and at some point skipped trash pickup because they are not able to manage their assets, both in human assets and in mechanical assets, to be able to get the job done.
You have, as I said at the beginning of the hour, you're going to have to produce essentially a Sisyphean effort to push this huge boulder up the hill. However, with this caveat, if there's anybody that I believe can do something like that and not just give lip music to things, it's you, because I believe that you are a very, very motivated individual. But the issues facing Baltimore, high crime, people leaving, people fleeing, because when people flee, there goes your tax base.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely,
you can't afford to have people flee.
Absolutely.
You have jewels right there. At its heyday, my guess would be Baltimore was and can be an absolutely gorgeous city.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You are correct, sir.
Folks are talking about one big metro government in Baltimore, trying to merge the city of Baltimore and the county of Baltimore. And they tried that here in Sacramento, and it kind of got, that was LAFCO, they kind of got shot down in flames. Do you have any thoughts one way or the other with regard to the city of Baltimore and the county of Baltimore?
I would absolutely not want to see that happen.
Okay, and why would that be?
Well, for several reasons. One, the county is also very democratically entrenched, and that would be problematic. And Baltimore has suffered through failed leadership that has gotten us to a place where our decisions for our police officers are made by the state. Our decisions with regards to education, and specifically the Board of Education, our board is appointed, and because of poor management and corruption, at this point, the mayor appoints half and the governor appoints half. So to see more aspects of our city either being swallowed up or given to somebody else to control, I think would further. I think it would be very detrimental to the city. I think it would be detrimental for the residents. I think it would make it even harder for Baltimore to bounce back.
Shannon Wright, who is a Republican candidate for the city of Baltimore for mayor, is it just coincidence that you've emerged and Kim Klacik have both emerged in both Republicans to push the boulder up the hill? And how much pushback are you getting, and is she getting for you are saying the emperor has no clothes? The pushback has to be astounding on that.
It is. It is. But you speak truth to power, and there are those that won't like it, and there are those that will come out and support. And that's what we're looking for. Sometimes, to clean things up, you got to shake it up.
So was that accurate when I was typifying the city of Baltimore being inhabited by somewhere deep within the bowels of City Hall? Somewhere in there is the proverbial pit of vipers.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Pretty doggone accurate.
Okay, folks, if you happen to be over on the East Coast or anywhere within the sound of my voice, Shannon Wright, where should they go if it might be a little late to volunteer, maybe not, but if they want to donate to your campaign, where can they go to do that, please?
So they can go to writeforbaltimore.com, and there's a donate button there. I'm a member of a slate in Baltimore. I'm running with some other candidates. You can find me there at BaltimoreCity2020.com. It is absolutely not too late to volunteer or to donate. We are still phone banking, and we are still texting, and we are still doing all of those kind of things that people can do remotely from their own home in whatever state they're living in.
Okay. Perfect. Shannon Wright, God bless you. I think you're doing stellar work. I hope you win. Maybe it's too early to ask this question. I think I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask anyway.
Mm-hmm.
If you do not win, will you be back?
That is a definitive yes.
How did I know that? How did I know that? I really did. Yeah. Shannon Wright, obviously you have one of the best voices for radio, and I tell you that every time I listen to you because it's absolutely true. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
So much for being here tonight. It's midnight. It's 1 minute after midnight. I know your voice. You've been talking. So I greatly appreciate, Shannon Wright, the time that you've taken to be here tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ever so kindly, ma'am.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate you and all that you do. And to your listeners, enjoy the rest of the show. Have a great night. And if you get a minute, please do go to writeforbaltimore.com. I'm going to send you a couple of different links, if you could, to share with your folks.
Okay.
And that would be wonderful.
Okay, I will. And I'll share that story, and thank you for sending that to me. That was Shannon Wright. Thank you, ma'am. Absolutely astounding. What a wonderful woman, motivated, gonna keep people responsible. Baltimore needs someone like that more than ever. Just like we need certain personnel in this country more than ever. When I come back, we're going to be talking to Dr. Michael Jones, a constitutional scholar, Maybe he'll be on for the entire hour. Maybe he won't. He also is kind of towards the East Coast, so it's kind of late for him as well. I've got essentially 8 questions for him tonight regarding the upcoming election and also constitutional issues and questions about what happens on January 20th of 2021 if bad things happen in the intervening 104 days from November 3rd. Folks, please come right back after this.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York, the Lid himself, Jeff Dunetz. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunn.
Lots of guests, lots of segments, and lots of interesting things. And let's face it, there's nowhere for you to go, so you might as well tune in. Again, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. We're back live on the air on SHR Media, 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday, audio and Facebook Live, audio and video. Yes, we are going to do video. Facebook Live, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. Hope to see you soon.
Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, a mere 2 miles from the state capital, the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 p.m. Eastern, only on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com to listen. You can also watch on the SHR Media Facebook page and the SHR Media YouTube channel. No goldfish were abused in the making of this ad.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
It is he that is me, bringing perspective from across the sea. Join me, Jack Alexander, 4 days a week for the Jack Alexander Experiment podcast, as I take a unique outsider's look at the news and issues affecting life and liberty here in the USA. I'll show you what the mainstream media refuses to. Politics, border security, defense, healthcare, travel, nothing is off limits. Catch the Jack Alexander Experiment podcast each Monday to Thursday on Facebook, YouTube, and everywhere good podcasts can be found. Also, check out the website, www.jackalexanderexperiment.com.
Southern Sense is conservative talk with Annie, the radio chick you bellows as host, and C.S. Bennett co-host. Informative, fun, irreverent, and politically incorrect. You never know where they'll go, but you'll love the journey. Annie is a top conservative host on Top Talk Radio and features some of the finest guests packed with important politicians and newsmakers. Listen every Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern, noon to 3 Pacific, on the SHR Media Network. Remember, Southern Sense is common sense.
After 6 years covering terror and corruption, the Unpleasant Blind Guy is making a change. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker and YouTube through SHR Media and on the Western Free Radio Network as I team up with Jeff Mitchell, host of the English Defense League radio show on blogtalkradio.com. Check show pages for airtimes. It's the Unpleasant Blind Guy.
On EDL Radio.
There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome back to BZ's Berserk, Bobcat, Saloon radio show. Just want to let you know you can follow me. I'm really active on Twitter at BZEP, at BZEP. If you would, please share the show tonight. If you're listening on Spreaker right now, please hit share. If you happen to be listening to the show later in podcast, please share the show all over the place. And please share me. I am on Spotify, iHeart, Apple Podcasts, and Podcast Addict, because I know that you're out there. I know that podcast addicts are out there. If you're watching on YouTube, click share, please. Give us a big old thumbs up, if you would. If you're watching on Facebook, please click on share. I should have said this earlier in the show. And send out to all your friends and groups. Maybe next Tuesday night. Oh, my God. You're not going to believe the guy I got for next Tuesday night. I'm going to give you a name, but this won't be, it won't click with you. But if you ever want to be around, this guy is so, I don't know how to typify him. Worked for law enforcement, has tons of tales to tell, but that ain't the fraction of his story. Never spoken to him before, spoke to him this past couple of days for maybe an hour. But after he sent me his CV and various letters and whatnot, I thought, okay, I got to get this guy for an hour. He said, an hour? Sure. I said, okay, would you consider being on for 2 hours? He said, yeah. He says 2 hours is essentially the minimum amount of time that I will need to tell my story. I'm going to have a hell of a time trying to keep this guy on track. And you're probably thinking right now, BZ, what are you talking about? I'm telling you, folks, if you want to hear what I think is going to be a stellar interview from an individual who has tales I have never heard before, and the things that have occurred to him, next Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. The guy's name is John Carman, Carman. And you can try to find him on your favorite search engine. Oh, my God. I think this is going to be a show. It will be in extremis, shall we say. In the meantime, what we have on the air is we have Dr. Michael Jones, I presume. And Dr. Jones, Michael Jones, the underground professor, a constitutional scholar, thank you for being here tonight, sir.
I thought this was Uber Eats.
It is, and that's why you waited so long. Because you thought, hey, would the fat guy get over all the introductions and everything?
For a minute, I thought you were introducing me on Tuesday, and I got the wrong night. Then I realized, no.
No, because I called you before. You have gone in the past year and a half or two, and maybe more, through a journey that would have killed much lesser men and women. So maybe you want to talk about that, maybe you don't. If you don't, that's cool. But all I want to say is, the point of me saying that is, I really appreciate the time that you're taking to be here tonight, because you and I have had a conversation back and forth on text and whatnot. And I said, I have 8 questions for you, constitutional questions. And can you do a half hour? And you said yes. And I said, can you do, 45 minutes or an hour or something like that? And you said yes. And they are constitutional questions that I think, particularly in light of what's happening in D.C., in the House, in the Senate, in the Oval Office, constitutional questions that I wager many, many people are formulating in their minds. And the first individual...
most will get it wrong.
And that's why I've had you here. That's why I've had you here. Folks, for background, I have had Michael Jones on the show before, numerous times. He is a constitutional scholar. To buttress that up, can you tell people, Michael Jones, what you've done, your training, your education experience, and also the fact that you had your own radio show where you yourself went into many, many constitutional issues?
Yeah. Well, now you're making me reminisce. I miss doing my own show, let me tell you. I miss all the people that I met in radio before I fell off a cliff and disappeared. Kind of like Gandalf, when he was still gray. I come back white now. Is that allowed to come back white? I can't. I'm not sure anymore.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. But you conducted entire shows that had nothing to do with all sorts of issues involving the Constitution, and that's primarily where your education lays, does it not?
Right. That's my passion. Is the founding of the country. That's where my PhD is in the revolution in continental America. And as well as Britain at the same time, because you can't really understand our revolution, and if you don't understand the British side of the equation. And one of the things that made me different, I won't say unique, but it certainly made me different than most, was that I didn't say, when I teach this, I don't teach it just that America was pure and perfect as a wind-driven snow. And that the Russians, Freudian, the British were, all bad and evil. That's just not the case. In fact, I made a statement once that if we had the communication abilities of today, the Revolutionary War never would have happened. Because most of the reasons the war was allowed to take place and happen was because of the fact that it took, so long to get a message back and forth across the Atlantic. And, they had schooners and schooners that could go pretty quick, but it still took minimum of, 2 weeks to go each way. And that delayed the ability to, for command from England to the generals over in America, and they were more autonomous, and they made a lot of mistakes, and so did we on our side, especially diplomatically. But anyway, my passion is in the founding of the country and the Constitution, the framers, the debates on the Constitution, and I'm one of the people that there's two ways to teach a Constitution in this country. One is to go into common law explicitly, going into stare decisis, which is the decisions that have come before from, like, say, the Supreme Court or Court of Appeals or whatnot. And the other way is to teach it from the perspective of what the framers did when they put it together. What were they thinking? What did they actually mean when they said that the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, blah, blah, blah. And the 10th Amendment said everything that wasn't spelled out in the Constitution was reserved to the people and the states. Actually, it says, I think, the states and its peoples. But anyway, the understanding of that, you can't get it from Supreme Court decisions. You can't get the understanding of what the Second Amendment is and the right to bear arms from Supreme Court decisions, because the Supreme Court makes their own decisions based on their personal views. And especially after 150 years of Supreme Court issuing decisions, it all changed into activist courts. And in fact, you can kind of blame Abraham Lincoln. He actively sought judges to appoint as justices that were against, Sanford decision. And he was, and I'll give you that's actually a current idea, is that decision came up in the debate for the vice presidential debate when Kamala Harris tried to pretend that Abraham Lincoln didn't appoint Chief Justice within 27 days of the election because he thought the people should be able to decide and wait until the next presidential election, which is bullcrap. There was several reasons. One was he was hoping that the Chief Justice would pass away, and that was the man who wrote the Sanford decision. And that's the decision that blacks were lesser beings than whites, and that you could treat them as property. And Lincoln wanted to abolish that, and so he waited until the Chief Justice passed, and then appointed one of his rivals, Chase. The guy's name was Chase, and he was a rival for the presidency of the Republican Party in the primaries. And so he appointed him as Chief Justice to get him out of the way, but also to put somebody who was against the Sanford decision. And so anyway, Kamala was wrong, not to mention the fact that the Senate was not even in session, and so he couldn't appoint a justice, let alone a Chief Justice, until the Senate came back into session. And that's why his altruistic efforts were really about. Anyway, that's me. I've been in the military. I served 11 years, 9 months, 15 days, and 8 hours in the Air Force. And
but who's counting?
Electronic warfare. Sir?
But who's counting?
Right. I never really sat down to figure it out. That's just a rough number. And now I'm retired as of 1 October from the post office as well. So I put 25 years there, and been in government service my whole life, federal. And I grew up as a brat, grew up all over the world, and then went in the military myself and spent a lot of time all over the world. And so I've got practical applications of learning. And I've gone to colleges around the world, too, in Germany and in England and other places, taken a course here or there. And what else should I tell you? I'm ABD on 3 different PhDs, philosophy, history, and theology. Political science, rather. Theology is the one that I'm thinking about finishing. So I've got a lot of book education, a lot of papers on the wall saying I is smart, and or at least it says I is a graduate. And then I had my own radio show where we had a pretty large audience by the time I bailed out. It was just too hard health-wise to keep going, and I was having a real hard time keeping things mentally in front of me, that I could access the things, because I never did my show with notes or any of that. Everything, if you ever go back and listen to any of my shows, you'll see that I did them from the top of my head, and whatever God pointed me to say, whatever issues he wanted me to talk about. Half the time, I gave my shows a title, and it had nothing to do with what I was talking about, because God chose a different topic. And so, anyway, I had a pretty good show. I had a steady core of people there that were always by my side, like Mary, my Czarina, the sheriff of radio, and of course Ken and Dave and you and others, and it made for a nice core, I think, for us as friends, and Dan, can't forget Dan.
Dave Milner is in chat. Dave Milner is in chat, and he said it was constitutional stream of consciousness, and it was awesome.
That's it. That's a good way to put it. And And I could have shaved 20 minutes off of my diatribe if I'd have just thought of that. Goodness. Anyway, that's my bona fides, I guess. I've been called a constitutional expert for quite a while, and I differ from a lot of constitutional experts on what the Constitution actually is saying to us, mostly because I have the bad habit of pointing out what the founders and framers thought, and that gets in the way of facts of con law as it's taught today. And I mean, if you know these things, it's like it's hard to wrap your head around. Like, for instance, long before Georgia and Texas and the other states said we were going to secede from the Union because of states' rights, New York led the way, along with Pennsylvania and New Jersey and Rhode Island and a few others. They led the way, claiming they were going to secede from the Union if the Second Amendment wasn't ratified. Now, wrap your head around that. These states have the most draconian gun laws today.
Yes.
And yet they refused to sign the Constitution or to be a part of this country if the Second Amendment was not ratified. And yet today, they don't care. And I say something that a lot of people think is weird. I'll say something like, if you read the 10th Amendment only, you don't understand it, because the 9th Amendment and the 10th Amendment must be taken together. Must be. And you don't understand either if you don't understand that they're essentially binary, that they have to be considered together in order to get the full grasp of what they mean and the power of them. And this lack of understanding has led to a grotesque growth in central power. And the cute little things that our country has done, like use the word democracy instead of Republican. We're a republic. We're not a democracy. And to say that we're a democracy is, like to say we're a bunch of oranges too. We're just not a democracy. We're not mob rule. The framers and the founders both thought that democracy was mob rule, and they were highly against it.
If there's one thing I learned from you that I can regurgitate to you right now, and it's not regurgitation, it's embedded in my wheelhouse, is...
I bet I know what it is.
Yes.
I bet it's...
Three words. And right. That is, because I asked you this one time, one of the first times I had you on the show, I said, what is the United States of America? And you said, I'm going to tell you what it is. And you remember that from now until doomsday. The United States of America is a constitutionally federated republic. It is not a democracy. So can you tell folks, let's see, I got about 4 minutes before the bottom of the hour break. Can you tell folks the difference between a constitutionally federated democracy and why people don't understand the difference between a democracy and a republic?
Right. The wheelhouse, real quick, is this. Constitutionally federated republic means that we have a constitution, which is a bed of laws. It's the highest law of the land, and it outlasts everything else. But no matter what else we want to do, it has to be in conjunction with the Constitution. It can't be opposed to it, or it can't be law. Okay? And then federated means that we have a two-system government. We have a central government, which is located in Washington, D.C. now. It was in Pennsylvania and New York. Now it's in Washington, D.C. as a zone. It was created as a zone in Washington, is a district, a federated district. Okay, and the land was given by Thomas Jefferson, and set up mostly swampland. He gave away, but it was set up for the government to be set up as a neutral zone, which is going to come up pretty soon because the Democrats are trying to bring Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico and other places as states so they can gain senators.
Sure.
And take over the Senate.
Yeah, forever.
But it can't be, right. And it was set up to never, ever be a state. And this is why they can't vote. And this is why they can't do anything like a state has, because they don't have the power of a state. They're a neutral territory. So that's federated. The other part of the federated government is the state governments. Now, you've seen the Mother Justice, right, she's got those scales. Well, if you have the scales in front of you and you put the central government on one side and the state governments on the other, it equals out. All right? And we can nullify. State nullification comes from that very concept, by the way. So we have the state governments on par with the central government. That's a division of power, one of the many separations of powers that our government has created or was created as to by the Constitution. Then you have the republic. Now, a republic is different from a democracy. In a democracy, you know, your listeners, I bet, complain about how often they have to vote. And they're tired of going to the polls all the time to vote. I hear that all the time when I was an election judge, that they were just tired of voting, that we do it too often. Well, if we were a democracy, a true one, we'd be voting just about every day. Because if Congress needed more paper clips and crap, we'd have to go down and vote. And if they want to do this or that or the other, then we would have to vote. Congress would vote for something, and then it would be put to the people to vote to ratify it, basically. And that's not how our government's set up. We're a republic. Now, republic, the major difference is this. We hire people to go be managers for us. They're not our leaders or rulers. They're managers. I'll accept the word leader, but not ruler. And they've become rulers in Washington with absolute power. And it doesn't matter what branch you're talking about. They all seem to have it. But the idea is that we would elect people from our own ranks to go to the House. So that means barbers and maids and, oh, God bless me, bartenders from New York to go to Congress and represent us. That's exactly who's supposed to be in Congress. Now, the senators were like the lords. You had the House of Commons and the House of Lords in England in Parliament. Well, our Senate was our version of the House of Lords. It was supposed to be people that were studied and learned and had degrees and professionals and doctors and lawyers and whatnot. Preachers, believe it or not, that was one of the categories that they were really big on, was preachers going to the Senate. And they go there for a longer period of time to add stability to the government. And they're co-equal with the House of Representatives, and that is a bicameral legislative section of our government. And then you have, of course, the executive and the judicial branches. And so as a republic, we've divided our government. And people often forget this, that there's a separation of powers, not just between the president and the legislative branch of Congress and the judiciary, but there's a separation of powers from the sovereigns of this country. And it just happens to be that you and I and the rest of the people out here are the sovereigns of this country, not the people in Washington, D.C. Sorry, Ken. And and so the sovereigns are us. And our separation of power comes through the Electoral College, which, we can go into if you want. But anyway, that's the difference between CFR and the CFD is a democracy would require us to be voting constantly. And everybody would have to vote, and everybody would get one vote, and there would be no separation of power from the sovereigns, and majority would rule, and that would mean that white people would get everything they want, black people and Mexicans and all the other minorities, political or racial, would be overwhelmed because 75% of this country is white. And if we were to boil it down to a racial thing, like it has been by the Democrat Party, then they would fail. So they actually don't even want a democracy. What they want is to call it a democracy so you don't realize it's a republic and you don't realize your role in it or your benefits of it.
Folks, we're talking to Dr. Michael Jones, who is a constitutional scholar. I told him earlier I have 8 questions for him. Some people are chat or making mention of the 25th Amendment. That's one of the questions that I have. Dr. Michael Jones also mentioned the Electoral College. I'm not going to do the break. I just want everybody to know this.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
So let's get to the questions. You mentioned the Electoral College. This was one of the first that came into my brain pan. People are talking about, well, we won't know who won election night. And one of the reasons we won't know who won election night is that all the votes will not be in. So my first thought was, okay, the Electoral College, which is one of the reasons I believe that the Democrats and leftists are doing their level best to make sure that they eliminate, ripping it out by the roots, the Electoral College. But Michael Jones, won't we know at least that night of November 3rd, won't we at least know who won the Electoral College?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Okay. All right.
If all these absentee ballots and military ballots, here's a dirty little secret. They are rarely ever counted in an election. All right. They cost money to count, and they take time and labor to do so. All right. So they're rarely counted. Here's the rule. If one candidate could benefit from all of the ballots that are mailed in, then they will have to count them. For instance, if they have 5,000 absentee and military ballots on hand and someone loses the election by 4,000 votes, then they have to count all the absentee ballots. And that's the only time they'll come and play. But if there's a 10,000 vote difference and only 5,000 absentee ballots sitting around, then they will never count them. They'll just box them up and keep them for records. Okay, so now, depending on how close races are across this country, especially when the one you're talking about is, of course, the presidential election. So if the election is very close, then a lot of places are going to end up having to count absentee ballots and mail-in ballots and military ballots. And that's going to be time-consuming, considering how many people there are. And I think this will be a large turnout.
I do too. Most definitely.
Now,
on both sides.
Yes. Yeah, on both sides. But here's the trick. I don't think we're going to have to worry about that. I'll go ahead and tell you now that I think we'll know on election night the Electoral College decision, and that's because we may not know the popular vote, but we'll know the Electoral College vote.
Okay.
And I think that is because President Trump is going to win in a landslide. And I really do. I have been very active here lately of doing polling like I used to with my political science degrees. And I have discovered that there are a lot of people that are out there who do not want their family to know they're voting Trump. And that they have changed. And the people who come over this country and are legal aliens, legal citizens who have gone through and done all the tests and paid all the money and spent all the time and messing around with the government in a needlessly complicated system to gain citizenship in this country, they feel like they earned it. And they are very angry at the Democrat Party for it's constantly trying to circumvent that system and allow people that come over illegally first place in line. And so there's a large contingent of Jamaicans and Cubans and whatnot that are just absolutely livid. And there are a lot of blacks that have noticed that Trump has produced more jobs for black people than Obama did. I just wish the Republican Party would, get on that and trump it a little more. But, even with the COVID problems, which I'm still not utterly convinced that the Democrat Party wasn't part of it with their league with China, thinking it would ransack and ruin this president. Even with that, the job growth that we're having right now, the recovery that we're having in the midst of a COVID crisis is phenomenal, considering that all the blue states are on total lockdown, like your state. And the COVID problems are worse for those states than they are for the states like mine, like Texas, that is open and, and freer, and trusting the rugged individualism of the natives of this state. Unfortunately, the states that have blue states and governors that are Democrat think that they're dictators and can tell you everybody what they can do, what they can breathe, where they can go, how they can live, which is just mind-boggling that, A, that any governor thinks they have that power, and B, that the people in those states go along with it. Where are the pitchforks and the fire and the tar and the feathers?
Exactly. These governors are getting away with it because, in my opinion, people are not reacting. So when you have a populace consisting of mice and sheep, then just like rioters, they'll keep pushing the envelope. And that's definitely, like you mentioned, Michael Jones, like you mentioned, it's definitely happening right here in California. Always spell it with a K, and with New York. You cannot convince me otherwise that it isn't purposeful that California and New York, two of the larger behemoths in terms of economy and production, it is critical, I believe, to the Democrats that these states be kept locked down because that creates anger at D.C. and specifically the Oval Office. I'm sorry, I don't believe in coincidence anymore. Yeah, I don't believe in coincidence anymore.
But that's not what's happening. The people are finding, Trump is Trump. If this had been Bush or somebody, he would have rolled over and the Democrats would have just nailed his hide to the wall.
Yes.
But Trump doesn't let that. Trump has even gotten COVID. So now they're like, oh, now what do we do? Besides pray he's going to die from it, what are we going to do? Because now, we can't say that he's uncaring of people that got COVID. Half his family has. They can't call him anti-Semitic because half his family is Jewish, and they just don't know what to do. He appoints a Supreme Court nominee that has 27 kids, and half of them are black from Haiti. Actually, just 2 out of 7, right?
Yes.
But, I'm being facetious, but
Point well taken.
What are they going to do? Trump is the exception to the rule. I like to think that I would have been a lot like Trump had I run for office. But, who knows?
We addressed that issue, and this is actually my 8th question for tonight. But since it's here, this just raised its head today. So I may as well ask you the question now. An article came out from The Hill, and a bunch of others as well, saying Pelosi now is talking about the 25th Amendment. So she said today that Democrats are going to hold an event on Friday to discuss the 25th Amendment over, quote, concerns over President Trump's coronavirus diagnosis. This is what she's saying. Tomorrow, by the way, come here tomorrow, we're going to be talking about the 25th Amendment, but not to take attention away from the subject we have now in response to a question at the press conference regarding a possible coronavirus stimulus package. So they pressed her for clarification, and she said it's time to invoke the 25th Amendment, which delineates presidential succession. But she declined to provide an explicit answer, but she hinted around the discussion was tied to, she said, a lack of transparency from the White House over Trump's health. So, the 25th Amendment, pulling the big red handle, and Donald Trump. Michael Jones, any thoughts?
I'm not worried about it. That's just Pelosi being Pelosi. Here's the deal. The 25th Amendment is to make sure that we have a sustained government, and that if something happens to our president, that we'll have a continuity of government. Right now, we had some problems with the whole thing with Ford, and when Reagan got shot, we had Alexander Haig run up and say, "I'm in charge." when he wasn't. And we have a lot of misfirings on the 25th. But here's the deal. There's 4 options, I think, if I remember right, to the 25th Amendment, and 3 of them require the president to direct that he's got a problem. Either he dies or he sends a letter to the legislator and says, I can no longer continue my duties, say because I have COVID. Well, Trump's not going to write that letter. He left the hospital 2 days later, and he's running the House again, so the White House. So that issue is gone. Now, there's only one way it can be circumvented, the 25th, if a majority of the executive department, meaning all the people that Trump has appointed or given jobs to, says that Trump is incompetent, and I doubt seriously any of them will do that, or they'll all be fired. Or the legislative body. So it takes a majority of the legislative body to strip the president as incompetent and not capable of fulfilling his duties, and then the next person in line would be Pence, which I'm pretty sure they would probably rather have Trump over Pence. But with the Senate being in charge by Republicans, Republicans are in charge of the Senate, I don't see the 25th Amendment being executed. And I don't see us losing the Senate. In fact, I see us making major gains in the House. But I could be wrong. This is just speculation. But I don't see that even if the Democrats got the majority of the Senate and the House, it would take a supermajority of both to overthrow the president. And so that means 3/4 of the Senate and 3/4 of the House would have to vote the president incompetent and then remove him. And then that would go down to the vice president. And then if they removed him, they would go down to the Senate pro tem, and then the speaker and so on. I think that's what Nancy really thinks, is that she can figure out a way to get rid of everybody and make herself president. That's probably what's on her mind.
I wouldn't be surprised. Folks, we're talking to Michael Jones tonight. He's a constitutional scholar, and somebody is on the telephone who would like to talk to you. Can you take a phone call, Mike?
Sure, I guess.
Okay.
I can hear it.
All righty. I'm going to do my best to make sure that you can. Caller, can you talk to Michael Jones here? Caller, you are on.
Are you talking to me, BZ?
Yes, I'm talking to you. Go ahead, sir.
Hey, Professor, miss your show terribly.
Well, thank you.
Hey, listen, I've got a question for you.
So you're the guy who listened to it, huh?
Excuse me?
I said, yeah. So you're the guy who listened to my show.
Yeah, I was the one from Alaska.
Oh my goodness! I do remember you now. Yes.
Yes. Hey, I was talking with some friends, and we were talking about the flag, and the difference between the flags with the fringes on it and the flags without the fringes on it. And it was said that the flag with the fringe are for like the commander in chief and people in control. The flags without the fringe is when our politicians and diplomats are on political missions rather than a military mission. Anyway, the discussion got into the courts, and one of the gentlemen that I was talking to said if you ever go into a courtroom and notice the gold fringe around the flag, and they ask you to cross the bar into the court, he says, don't ever do that, because that indicates that is an Article 2 court, and you only want to be in an Article 3 court. And if I'm correct in my thinking, Article 2 of the Constitution is to Congress. Article 3 is the judicial branch.
But here's the thing with the flags. As in most things, our government abuses the flags, and they were originally for court-martials in the military when they were fringed out. Plus, they were the executive flag for the president, as George Washington established. But since then, a lot of people think the fringed flag looks cool, so they stick it in their in their Boy Scout troop or the court. But there are, if you go to a judicial court, like a federal court, and they have that fringe flag, I would make sure who the judge is and what you're in for. Yeah, you're right.
Well, but have you heard of the differences between an Article 2 and an Article 3 court?
Yes, I have. I'm not sure exactly where that originated exactly, because before it was one of those things where it was just put down as a conspiracy thing, but then things kept happening, and people have been. You're not the first to bring that up to me. I'm afraid I don't have a deep understanding of that, but my shallow understanding is that it's not right, and that the Congress can convene hearings, but they're not a court unless they are in the Senate judging the presidency for a removal. That's the only time they are actually a court, and that's being led by the Supreme Justice, Chief Justice. But otherwise, all should be Article 3, the judiciary.
Right now, this is kind of what's going through my head once I heard about Article 2 and Article 3 courts. That in an Article 2 court, once you cross that bar, you're in their territory, and they can do anything to you that they want. But an Article 3 court, you do have you have more freedoms than you do in an Article 2 as far as how you are represented and represent yourself. Now, going through my mind and thinking about it, and pondering, and I would like your opinion on this. In an Article 2 court, they're going to charge you with breaking a law or a crime, and it doesn't matter. You're either going to be found innocent or guilty on the law. What if you go to an Article 3 court? Not only are they going to charge you with the crime and a law, but you can be found guilty, not guilty, or the law could be unconstitutional. So the law itself is on trial too. Now, would you consider that as a valid thought on the differences between the two courts?
I think, let me guess something. Your name's Boyd, right? Boyd from Alaska. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Oh, God, see. Wow, I can't believe I remember that after 2 years of being off of radio. I told you I remembered you. Yeah, Boyd, I think that's an accurate assessment. I don't think it's the way it's supposed to be, but I think that's the way it's come to be. And I don't know why. It's something I probably should be more curious about now that you bring it up again. That's good. Perhaps I can come back on the show another time with PZ and talk about that after I've done some research. But I believe you to be essentially correct in what you're saying.
Hey, Michael Jones. Michael Jones, can we, because I'm starting to run out of time, can we come back to January 20th and some more questions focusing on that?
Yes, shoot.
Okay. Boyd, thanks for your phone call. I greatly appreciate it, sir, but I'm running out of the time for tonight.
Thanks, BZ, and thanks, Professor.
Thank you, Boyd.
Good to hear from you again.
Appreciate it, sir. The second question I had tonight, Michael Jones, is, it looks like we're going to be counting popular votes possibly a week or maybe even more after the election. So does any aspect of the Constitution, Bill of Rights, or con law address any aspects of that? In other words, I'm thinking, okay, Election Day, the polls close from anywhere from 6 to 8:30 to 10 to midnight all across the states. But the voting should be done at the very latest by midnight, yet we're still going to be counting votes possibly far after. So does the Constitution, Bill of Rights, or any con law address some of these issues?
Yes. Okay, the Constitution basically says this is a state problem and that the states will deal with it. And for the Constitution is very silent when it comes to election law for the most part, because it believes that each state should set up its own rules and regulations. Now, that's the problem with this, is that every state has a different thing. There are some states that give 17 days after the day of the election for mail-in ballots to be received. Texas says that it has to have the postal stamp of the day of the election, and it can be received no later than 1 day after the election.
Okay.
So it gives 1 day, where other states give you 17 days, over 2 weeks to get your ballot into them, which is just ridiculous in my book, because you're trying to have an election here, not a popularity contest.
Well, California is one of them.
Thing to remember. Yeah, they're one of the worst. Here's the deal. The popular vote could go to Biden, and he could have 10 million more votes than Trump in the popular vote, and it doesn't matter. It just depends on where those votes are. If they're all in California and New York, well, he's going to win those anyway, so it doesn't matter. If every citizen of California and New York go out and vote and just runs up the popular vote like crazy, it won't matter, because there's only so many electoral votes in each state. And the electoral vote is what counts. That's how you win. And it doesn't matter if one party or both don't like it. That's the rules. And they didn't like it with when Al Gore lost. They didn't like it when Hillary lost anymore. But that's the truth of it, is that you have the electoral vote. So the popular vote in each state helps you decide the electoral college. For instance, the popular vote in Texas, I think we have some 35 electoral delegates. Maybe it's been more now, because everybody's been moving to Texas like crazy. Or it will change with new apportionment, but let's say it's 35 electoral votes. So it doesn't matter how many people vote. If 50 people vote or 5 million vote in Texas, whoever wins the popular vote in Texas gets the electoral votes. But there are some states where you split them. So Biden and Trump could split the electoral delegates in a couple of places. I can't remember where, like maybe Louisiana or something. And with the coming storms that they're under right now, there's speculation that Louisiana, which is a Democrat state, will have a very suppressed voter turnout because of the hurricanes. Hurricane Delta's hitting it tonight. And so these, weather affects voting too. But the Electoral College will be decided by the internal popular vote, and that may not be decided on election night because of the leniency of some states on counting mail-in ballots. And again, if those states are close in election results, then they'll have to count the absentee and military ballots, etc., and that will add time too, as well.
Okay, Michael Jones, let me ask you this. This will probably be the final question.
Wait, let me say one thing real quick.
Sure.
If we don't know what's going to happen with the Electoral College, then it has to be decided by January 24th, no matter what. Because if we don't have if we do not know what the electoral delegate count is by the January 24th, it goes to Congress, and Congress has to decide who is going to be elected. The House chooses oh my goodness, is it the Vice President? Now here it is. Now I'm having a hiccup in my brain. One of the chambers chooses the president. The other one chooses the vice president. I'm thinking it's the Senate that chooses the vice president, but I can't be sure right now. But they have to choose from the top 3 vote getters in the presidential election. So they can't just name people. Like Pelosi can't be named as president unless she's running. And so they take the top 3, and then they choose from that. And they have to have a majority vote to be elected. And then that, but a lot of this has changed because of the understanding, like what happened when we had John Adams and Thomas Jefferson on the same ticket, and they were in opposite parties. And they changed a lot of these rules on that. And so they have to be from the same party. So we won't have a Democrat president and a vice president that's Republican. It'll have to be one party or the other. And but the Congress would make that decision. And if they can't decide, then the current administration will stay in until the decision is made. So Trump would virtually stay president until the decision.
Okay, so Michael Jones, you're saying, I thought it was January 20th, but you're saying that the decision has to be made one way or the other by January 24th, and then if not, then it goes over to the Senate and the House. And in chat, Sergeant Booker said, I think it's the House that does the president and the Senate that does the vice president, but you had already said that.
Yes, each senator casts one vote for the vice president. So I did get that right. That's good. I'm not sure if I got but you see, the whole deal is Electoral College, you have to gain 270 electoral votes, if I remember right.
You're exactly right. It's 270.
Yeah. And if the Electoral College will be disbanded and dismissed, and it will move to Congress if they don't have a decision. I thought it was the 24th. It may be the 20th.
Okay.
And it changes on even and odd years, by the way. Elections that are in even years are different than elections in odd years. Of course, because of the number of days and everything. But each you got to get like 26 votes to win in the House. Now, here's the deal. All of the congressmen from Texas get together and caucus, and then they get one vote. So Texas gets one vote in the presidential election if it goes to Congress. And it's not 35 votes. So we all come together, we decide, and then we vote as one in Texas for whoever gets the majority of the votes from the congressman of Texas, and then Texas votes for that person and gets one vote. And since there's 57, how many states since Obama? Now we're down to 50, right? So
no, I think he thinks there's still 58. So yeah, we got 58 states to worry about.
Right, and 51 in the Senate you have to get to win. Yeah.
Okay, so Michael Jones, let me ask you the fateful, fruitful Fraga. which is this. If you put on your Nostradamus Mr. Peabody's Wayback Machine hat, do you foresee any particular path occurring for this election? We know it's going to be a crap show. That much is a given. But do you perhaps see it going any way, Electoral College, popular vote, etc., one way or another?
Yeah, I think so. I really think that we're seeing the same thing we saw with Hillary, how far out she was and how she was ahead and there was no way she could lose and all the things that happened from that election. She basically disappeared from campaigning like Joe has. He just doesn't face people. If he has a campaign event, there's only 100 people there instead of 3,000 like Trump has. They blame social distancing, but I think what's really going on is that the public is distancing itself from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But I see the path is that I think the Rust Belt, the Sun Belt are going to go heavily for Trump, and of course the eastern and western borders will go heavily for Biden. And it'll be just like last time where you see that electoral delegate map where damn near every county in America's red, except for a thin line on the outer edges on the east and west banks. And I think that's be exactly what happens this time. But I think the popular count will be higher for Trump than last time. I think he's going to have a lot more support. I don't believe that people are buying the Democrats' message that Trump's ruined the economy and he's not the man to bring us back. I think they've seen that Trump brought all these jobs and did everything with all the adversity, meanwhile being falsely impeached and hounded and investigated by the federal government, by the FBI and whatnot, like Pence brought up in the debate, that the whole time they were being investigated under FICA and other things, Pfizer rather, not FICA, Pfizer, illegally. And yet they still managed to not only win, but to outgovern the Democrats. And I think that's going to happen this time too, because this time they're not being spied on by the CIA and the FBI. And they're not being hounded and undermined, just lied about. And so I think we're going to do very well for conservatives. And I think the Supreme Court justice nominee is going to go through.
I do too.
And she's going to, and I think that Trump has a good chance of another one or two more appointees. Lincoln had 5, I think. And so he stacked the court. Now, sadly, if we lose the election, then I don't think you'll ever see a Republican president again, because they will do everything they can to make sure that happens by fiddling with the Electoral College or dismantling it completely, bringing in other states to stack the Senate, and with the migration places like Texas that are turning purple instead of red, which it should be, but it's turning purple because of the ungodly amount of people coming from Democrat states that are fleeing the high taxes, stagnation, draconian COVID laws, etc. And they're coming to places like Texas, which are free and open, and then they're bringing all their crap with them and their desires of social services, forgetting that those social services have to be paid by higher taxes, and the higher taxes stagnate economy, blah blah blah. And then they do the same thing. They're like locusts traveling across the country.
I say that essentially the future of America, which is essentially going to be decided on November 3rd or when everything gets collated in all as many votes as possible counted, if you don't find them in the dumpsters throughout the United States. This really is the crucial election of all. It is the pivot point. So, Dr. Michael Jones, number one, thank you for being here tonight.
BZ, we just had a mayor candidate get caught with all kinds of thousands of absentee ballots in his house. A mayoral candidate over here near Dallas. So, yeah, it's going to be bad election fraud, I think.
Well, the election fraud is going to be terrible. I had a video on from Project Veritas where various Somalis under the direction of Ilhan Omar are going into people's homes, the elderly in particular, and simply forcing them to vote and then being paid for votes. The issue is massive. So, Michael Jones, thank you ever so kindly for being here tonight, sir, and I would love to have you back on the show again.
Just call me. I'll be here.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thanks. It's a lot of fun, BZ.
Oh, you bet it is. God bless you, sir. Take care and good night.
Good night.
Folks, Dr. Michael Jones, I want to end with this. If it's not close, they can't cheat. That was a Hugh Hewitt book in 2004. And if you want to look and see what all the leftists and Democrats have in mind, and anarchists have in mind for the United States of America, you have to look no further than California. And if you love California, then you'll love the United States under Democrats.
Monsieur has unlocked!
So, I guess I could do my usual spiel, but I'll do this instead. Do not listen to any of the polls. The purpose of the polls now and the American media maggots is to either make you think that Trump is an easy win, so don't show up, or Trump is so far behind, don't show up. That's the goal. Make no damned mistake. Get out and vote. Fill in your ballot. Don't mail it. Take it to your election board. Give it to an individual. Get a name. Don't mail it or vote in person. But if you're absentee or mail in, don't trust the post office. Why would you? Take it to your board. You don't need a middleman. Show up to vote. Vote red in November and forever. You're not going to believe who I have on Tuesday night. God bless. Have a great weekend, folks.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night.
Good night, Jim Bob. Go to sleep.
Good night, and good luck.
By the way, I forgot to add, thanks to Shannon Wright for being here tonight in the first hour, and thanks to Michael Jones for being here in the second hour. Folks, have a great weekend. God bless America. God bless all of us.